Well, good afternoon and welcome back to our Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity webinar series focusing on workplace mental health. I'm Sean Egan, Deputy Director for Labor over here. Many of you have been joining us all along, so you know a lot of this information, but there is a Q&A box at the top of your screen that you can submit questions to at any time throughout today's presentation. And we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. I know that is challenging, but we do our best. And if you haven't already, please make sure you sign up for emails on our michigan.gov/workplace mental health page. That site also includes recordings of all of our webinars. It'll have this one and any slides and all that kind of fun stuff after we're done. It has our workplace mental health report, the Surgeon General's report, and other links and information to resources. And as we always talk about, we focus on those three pillars being things that are impacting our mental health happening in the workplace, things that are affecting the workplace. So that's things that we bring with us or have experienced, and certainly connections to individual behavioral health supports. We try to make sure we hit on these pillars with the various content of our webinars throughout the series. And we are definitely full steam ahead into our what can we do about it phase of our work. And we'll continue to identify issues and challenges, of course, but we're trying to make sure that we bring you tools and resources that you can start impacting our workplaces in a broader way. And today is part one of our second three-part series where we're going to be focusing on from awareness to action, cultivating a workplace culture of well-being. And we're joined once again by our great friend and key collaborator, Dr. Michelle Keys from the University of Michigan. She's been contributing to our work over the past few years behind the scenes that you may not know about, and has been a tremendous resource for us. So we're just so thankful to have you today, and I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Keys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sean. It is a pleasure to be back with you again today. As Sean said, my name is Michelle, and I am a clinical psychologist in the Department of Psychiatry and the Eisenberg Family Depression Center at the University of Michigan. I'm pleased to join you today for the first session in our series focusing on mental health and workplace culture and what we can do to make real change in our day-to-day workplaces. Our goal for this series is to learn more about mental health and also to think through some practical ways that you can contribute to a positive work environment. Today, what we're going to talk about is the reality of mental health at work. Whether you have personally experienced mental health challenges or supported a colleague who has, mental health truly affects us all. The reality is we spend a lot of our waking hours at work. Add to that the time that we spend thinking about work, and it makes up a pretty significant portion of our world. All of us, I think, have been hearing more and more recently about mental health issues, particularly since the pandemic. And in reality, for many of us, work is a primary source of stress. 84% of adults say that their job has impacted their mental health. And 76% have had at least one significant mental health symptom in the past year. I think even more concerning is if you look at how many people have had a mental health condition in the past year. That number is 1 in 5. So 20% of adults that you are working with, if you look around your table, you look around your office, 1 in 5 have reported having a diagnosable mental health condition in this past year. But people are reluctant to seek help. They're reluctant to share their concerns. They're reluctant to talk about their struggles. Many of us are hesitant to even bring it up with someone else. And yet, by doing that, we're allowing the stigma to continue. We're allowing the challenges to go unaddressed. And there's a real cost to that. Some people would like to think that mental health issues are personal. Oh, that's your personal life. It is not professional. But in reality, mental health does not clock out at 9 a.m. just because we show up to our jobs. In fact, we bring our whole selves to work every single day. And for those of us facing mental health challenges, or our colleagues who might be, there's a real cost to that. The first cost that we see at work is in the form of absenteeism. Mental health reasons are the most common reason for an absence. So of all the reasons you can think why somebody might miss work, a mental health issue is the number one reason. People with poor mental health miss an average of 12 days a year because of their mental health. We also know that mental health issues impact productivity. And usually that happens through something that we've come to call presenteeism, meaning that people are present, but they're not quite performing at capacity. Workers with mental health issues report performing at about 72% of their full capacity. The other cost for specific to mental health for our workplaces include untreated mental health conditions, with the direct cost hitting healthcare expenses. So for any employer or organization who is covering healthcare cost, untreated mental health issues are a significant portion of your budget. And lastly, we know that mental health conditions are a major reason that people leave jobs, which of course leads to additional costs for hiring, for retraining, for getting somebody up to speed and part of your system, part of your culture, and the amount of time that then it takes a new person to really take on that job and to be productive in that realm. Mental health issues will significantly impact every aspect of your workplace, whether it is productivity, engagement, attendance, accuracy, relationships, success of the individual, success of the team, success of the company. So we get to a point where truly addressing mental health in the workplace is not only something that we should do because it's morally the right thing to do, but it's also an economic necessity. About some of these issues can start to feel very heavy and a little dark at times, and we wonder, what in the world can we do? How can we make an impact? How can we make a change as an individual, as a leader, as a team? And in reality, the difference you can make is to show up to things like this, to be open to learning, to be open to considering what's happening around you with your coworkers, your colleagues. Change does not happen overnight. It's not this big bright light that all of a sudden things are different. Instead, we need awareness and building mentally healthy workplaces, recognizing that it's going to take time and effort. And every single little thing that each of us can do to learn about mental health, to reconsider stigma, to practice wellness, it ends up being one light on a string of little lights that turn on. And as each of those lights come on, the world's a little bit brighter. So let's talk more and learn about mental health and stigma and what we can do in our own places of influence. First off, we want you to recognize that mental health exists on a wide continuum, from healthy all the way over here up to crisis and everything in between. We want to recognize that some distress is entirely, completely normal. There is no one who exists their entire lifetime or even maybe a week of their lifetime without some level of distress. But what we want to understand about distress is that distress is normal. It comes and it goes. It doesn't last forever or sit there forever. Distress is usually responsive to a situation. So for example, if someone dies, you are going to be sad. That is a normal distress response. If you're someone who is responsible for bringing in funding or bringing in contracts or securing deals, and that is at risk, of course you're nervous. Again, that's a distress response that's normal and in responsive to that situation. And while distress might be there, and it might even sit on you, it might even bring some stress to your life, it's not completely disabling. Illness is different. True mental health illness is persistent, meaning it is always there, whether you are at work, whether you're at home, no matter where you are. You might have moments where you can do a little bit more or you feel a little bit better, but it's still sitting with you. It is persistent. It is intense, much more intense than just basic level of stress or distress, and it's disabling. So what we start to think about when somebody is trying to figure out, like, is this just kind of a symptom or a distress, or is this actually maybe I have a mental health condition or illness, is how much disruption does it cause to a person's day-to-day life? And that's kind of the measure that you want to consider, either for yourself or if you're talking with others. Let's talk about some common mental health symptoms and conditions. So stress. I am going to venture to say that almost every single one of us who is on this call and sitting here today has at some point in their world felt stress, right? It's kind of part of human nature these days. And that stress absolutely affects our mental health. It leads us to feeling overwhelmed. We might have trouble relaxing or letting go or checking out of work or checking out of our home life. It can lead to physical symptoms of upset stomach, of headaches, of trouble sleeping, tightness in muscles or joints. It also can lead to us feeling kind of short-fused and impatient. We might get a little yelly with people or snappy. High stress also can cause us just to have trouble focusing, right? Because there's too many things in our brain at one time. Another mental health symptom that we're hearing quite a bit about lately is that of burnout. Burnout is different than stress. Whereas with stress, a lot of times we feel very activated. With burnout, there's an absence. There's an exhausted feeling. We are emotionally just tapped out. We are physically tapped out. It is hard to get the motivation to do much. We might look at a list of things to do and go, okay, yeah, I have to do that, but not really want to. Burnout also a lot of times means we have less tolerance for things, people, situations. We're a little more irritable, a little more cynical. Some of us might feel more numb and disconnected and kind of not care about things that are happening around us. Burnout, sometimes if you look at another person, maybe on your team or another colleague or coworker, you might mistake burnout for laziness or disengagement, when in fact, they have just burned through all of their energy and are in a state that's hard to pull back from. Depression. Let's talk a little bit about that. Depression's also going to show up as some low energy, but you're also going to see a pervasively low mood, a different kind of mood, a flat mood, perhaps a sad mood, less interest in things that they used to enjoy is a cardinal feature that you'll see in depression. People might be more withdrawn, less likely to socialize, have trouble focusing, have trouble thinking or making decisions. Just a flatter version of themselves. And last, anxiety. Again, just talking about these four because they are the most common kinds of symptoms and conditions you might see. With anxiety, sometimes you don't see anxiety because anxiety is something that's happening on the inside with racing thoughts, worrying about things, maybe some restless energy, trouble settling down, trouble concentrating, overthinking things. Interestingly, for many of us, there's a common myth, I think, in our culture where we assume that depression is more common than anxiety. And in fact, it's switched. In the US, there are approximately 42 million adults living with anxiety, 42 million, and 21 million living with depression. Part of the reason why I think we underestimate anxiety is because a lot of times anxiety is positively reinforced, right? Someone will say, oh my gosh, I worried about that all night, and then I decided what to do. And the response to that will be like, oh, good, I'm glad you figured it out. As opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you were worried about that. In performance kinds of situations, we want kids, adults, everyone to be a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious because it's a sign of caring about something. It's a sign of, it pushes us to prepare more. So there are times where we miss anxiety in ourselves and we miss it in others because it's become part of our cultural norms. Each of these different kinds of symptoms that we might see from a mental health perspective are entirely manageable with support. And if they get to the point where they are full on illnesses, are treatable with clinical care. One of the things we want to think about is how would I know if somebody was struggling at work? Like, what would I see? What does that look like? How does it show up at work? And my simple answer for that is that it shows up as something is different about that person. And it could be anything that's different about that person. You don't have to be a therapist or a clinician to recognize it. So let's say someone on your team or someone you're working with, you notice their work product is different. Maybe they're not doing as much, or what they're doing has more errors, or they're late with deadlines, or it's just not as good as it used to be. That might be a sign that something else is going on with them. You also might see something different in their work patterns. If you're a remote or virtual team, they now have their camera off more often, or they're absent to things that they would usually come to. Maybe they frequently joined you for lunch and they're starting to skip lunch and say, oh no, I need to work at my office. They aren't as responsive with emails. Their appearance is a little bit different. Their door is usually open and now it's closed all the time. So if you see those kinds of changes in work patterns, that something feels different than it used to, that might be a sign to watch out for. Another area that we commonly see when there's poor mental health are changes in motivation. So if you notice a colleague or coworker, or even yourself, feeling less engaged, less interested in the work, needing more reminders, needing more managing, that might be a sign that something's going on. And then the last area that we take note of is if a person's interpersonal style is different. If they seem to be isolating more, if they seem to be more tired or sad, withdrawn, if they're more grouchy with you or just kind of high-strung and scrambled and disorganized. So it's also entirely the possibility that you work with someone who may fit all of these characteristics. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's something mental health going on. That just might be who they are. What we're taking note of is if someone is different, someone's behavior, product, style has changed in some way. That's a good indication that mental health has entered the picture in some way. What do? Do you talk to them? An overwhelming number of people believe it is absolutely appropriate to talk about mental health at work. And many, if not most, want to talk about it or want to be asked or want it to be a consideration. Unfortunately, while people believe it's appropriate, only about 58% say they would actually feel comfortable talking about it. And why is that? In reality, stigma, right? We are all often still afraid of what will people say? What will people think? Will I be able to keep my job? Many of the leadership teams that I work with are absolutely adamant that they support mental health as a team they do, as a company they do, as a culture they do, and that there is no stigma in their workplace. And I always suggest that people pause around that assumption, because stigma might not look and sound like what you think it looks and sounds like. Stigma includes things that are jokes or dismissive comments that have something to do with mental health. Might be comments or behaviors that shame mental health, or that implies that mental health is a choice. You're choosing to be sad, you're choosing to have anxiety, or equating those struggles to weakness. So that's nice, right? I give these little categories and you're like, okay, but what does that actually sound like? Here are some examples, and I'm going to leave these up on the screen just for you to kind of look over and think through. But when we're categorizing what stigma actually sounds like when someone says it out loud, it's usually something around mental health symptoms aren't real. That's not a big deal. Everybody has a bad day. That's not a real problem. Or something that people should be ashamed of or should hide from. Maybe you shouldn't be on this project because you can't handle it. There's also the element of thinking that mental health issues are a weakness. And we may not even mean to say that, but we might say something like, oh, I don't know that they're going to be able to take care of this project the way that we want them to, because, they've had stuff going on. So I encourage you to look through this list and to think about if there have been times where you've heard some of these things, or maybe you've even accidentally said some of these things. Are we using words about mental health in ways that are actually supportive of mental health? Or are we inadvertently creating stigma and shame? Stigma doesn't just silence people, but it also costs companies in productivity and turnover and morale. What happens when we have a company or a culture or a workforce or even just a team that promotes stigma is that your coworkers will not speak up, employees will not speak up about concerns. People will leave organizations if that's the issue instead of asking for help because they won't feel safe asking for that help. Productivity will be down, trust will be down, and ultimately team dynamics will suffer. So what do we do about that? If you hear somebody say something, here's a few things that you might be able to say to counter some of those comments. To just acknowledge that, oh yeah, so I think mental health struggles are a little bit more common than what people think. Or, that's not the kind of language we want to use around here. I know you didn't mean that to be hurtful, but we're working on changing how we think about things. Or just encouraging people to understand it more. The more we understand, yep, it's confusing, but the more we try to understand, the better we can support each other. So calling it out if you're seeing it, reframing some things as you have the opportunity, and catching yourself, even if you say something going, ooh, I maybe shouldn't have said that. So what can you do today? Literally today, in this moment, right now. First off, we all can start with ourselves. Take stock of our own mental health. Where are you at on stress? Where are you at on burnout? Do you notice any symptoms of depression or of anxiety? Recognizing how we walk into the room matters because we're contributing to our own culture. And it might be that we want to reset as well. Also, starting with yourself, model an open mindset, encourage an open mindset. People are going to feel safer with others who model that kind of openness. Normalize check-ins. Now, when I say normalize check-ins, what I mean is being able to say to somebody, hey, how are you doing? Really. This doesn't mean going up to every single person that you work with. This does not mean taking over every meeting time or every one-to-one time, and this becomes your entire focus. We still have jobs to do. We still have many things that we want to accomplish and work on together. But it is allowing some space to recognizing if you see change in others and having the time and the space to say, how are you doing? And to even follow it up with, I noticed something seems a little different lately. I wanted to check in and see how things are going. And sometimes people will brush that off, and that's okay. But just being asked is powerful and is one of those little lights that starts to change the culture and to change the trust. Being able to say to someone, let me know if there's anything I can do that would be helpful, so that you are offering that space for somebody to ask and for them to know that it is okay. And then the last area today that you can do to be helpful for yourself and for others is to know the resources. Now, there are so many resources, and some of them are absolutely awesome. Some of them are not. When we think about resources, we're thinking about both internal to your company or your organization or your business, and as well as external. Internally, your HR support usually knows the best about what resources exist. They know about if you have an employee assistance program. They know about if mental health days are allowed. If you are in a position where you get to decide how days are allocated for people who have days off, offering and modeling the taking of mental health days is an incredibly powerful thing to do. Being aware of what your insurance benefits might be, particularly if you're in a leadership position, so you can share that information with others. Externally, the national best resource for crisis support is 988. 988 is a 24-hour hotline that is staffed by mental health clinicians and is available to anyone for any kind of mental health support. If you happen to be a veteran or military connected, when you first call the number, there's a button you can press and it will direct you specifically to someone who has specialized training in military and veteran connected issues. So please use that as well. Externally, you're also going to potentially be thinking about things like therapy or groups. Again, it's not your job as a coworker or even as a leader to say, here's a therapist referral, go to this person, but just to say, hey, we have some resources that are available either through HR or that are available through our EAP. Our insurance covers some of these things. It might be worth checking out. Simply modeling that those are options that are open and available. We truly know that mental health issues are common and that they impact all aspects of our work world. And in hand with that stigma is a real barrier to people getting help. And without help, people don't generally get better. And instead, it can get a lot worse and harder. But each of our small actions can start to shift that culture and to start turning on little lights here and there. I am happy to take more questions. I'm happy to talk with you more about these kinds of issues online or offline. Today's session really was kind of meant as a mental health 101 of the reality of recognizing that mental health is showing up at work. And here's some of the things you might look for, being mindful of stigma. Next month, when we meet again, I hope you'll be able to join us, and we're going to talk more specifically about leaders. For those of us who are in manager roles, leadership roles, supervisory roles, how can you use that role to foster a supportive workplace culture? Recognizing that leadership impacts mental health, and what are some small immediate changes that you can do to help normalize well-being and to enhance your team's resilience. So I really do hope to see you again next month for that discussion. I'm happy, Sean, to take any questions there might be, or to even stay on for a few minutes if there are follow-up questions.
Sure, we have a few questions to get to. I think this is a good one for you to answer. You said, like, a lot of people say it's good to talk about it, but not a lot of people are willing to talk about it. So we all have these coworkers, and this person asked, what should you do when you are so open that everyone comes to you, and as an empathetic person, it begins to weigh on you?
Yes, so as an empath, I think we attract people sometimes, that we become that person that everyone is drawn to, and recognizing that's a really heavy load to carry. That is a really heavy load for a single person to carry. And that while it's important for you to be, it's important for us to have people who are available to talk to, it is not your responsibility to carry that burden. It is not your responsibility to be that person for everyone. And so if you notice yourself doing that, I'd encourage you to consider how can you set some boundaries. And in addition to that, almost how can you have resources in your pocket? Because the moment that you start to get identified for that, people may come to you. But if you have something that you can say, oh, you know what, that's a really important thing that you're talking about. I'm aware of this resource. Have you considered this before? So then you can help pass them off to something that is actually supposed to serve that need. So almost like you're the awareness lane, but you do not have to be the ongoing service piece of that.
Yeah, and remember that you're not a therapist or a counselor when you're doing that. You're really a connector for those different resources. And then certainly we did, a lot of us in Leo did mental health first aid certification training, and they talk about that, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because you can't carry those burdens yourself, as Dr. Keys just said. So, you know, there's SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness. There's other things that you can do for your own self-care, but certainly, and it might be therapy for you if you are the office empath, as you called it, that's kind of taking in a lot from people. You're going to need to get that off from you as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, a couple more questions. Hang on, a couple just popped in. Who do we turn to if our supervisors and directors are the ones creating the mental health crisis by treating a group, lower positions, different than the rest of the group, higher positions?
Right, and I can see that question in the answer, noting because truly, like, the first thing I would say is talk to HR or talk to the union, and it sounds like those avenues have already been tried. At certain points, I think we all have come to there's a reason that 50% of people leave places of work because of mental health reasons. And a lot of times it's because leadership doesn't address that. And in some cases, that is the best course of action. If there are truly no avenues open to you, if talking to your supervisor, if talking to your supervisors, or talking to HR doesn't have that impact, it really does leave us with not a lot of choice. So we can either stay or we can go. Sometimes what I've seen groups do is employees will sort of rally together to start creating some frank documentation around some of the things that are happening, and almost have a coalition of, these are some of the concerns we have, how can we help get those addressed? Because many times more than one voice can be helpful, but it's hard sometimes, because sometimes our leaders truly are part of the issue.
Yeah, I think too, I would just, for any leaders and frankly for all of us, is that we tend to perceive the world through ourselves, and we think like our stuff is the most important, or our stuff is the most stressful, and sort of ignore the stress that everybody else is going through, typically, even if they're on our team, and sort of thinking like my part of this is harder than everybody else's. And I think we all know that's not true. So it's really kind of important that we look at teams differently. Here's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer, and I don't know what the answer is, but is there an actual cure for anxiety, or is it a continual treatment / sort of awareness situation for those with anxiety?
I love that question, because it depends on kind of how you think about illness, right? So I use the parallel to cancer. There are many people who will say cancer is cured, but in reality, many people relapse from cancer, and many people have tiny little cells still coursing around that come back as a recurrence. And so cure is a very interesting concept from a medical perspective. What I will say with anxiety is that for many of us, the way we think is a perpetual sort of part of our personality. There are absolutely phenomenal cognitive behavioral strategies that can help people learn to think differently and learn to control and to manage anxiety, because 99% of the time, a huge portion of anxiety is linked back to how we think about a situation. And if you can change the way you think, you can change the way you feel, you can change the way you're going to respond. And so I have had tremendous success in treating anxiety in everyone from 5-year-olds to 85-year-olds, because we focus on how to change their thinking. It can be hard for some situations, but I do believe that we can change how we think over time, and then learn to recognize what some of our triggers are, because for some of us, right, that anxiety pops up more likely in certain situations. So once you can work with a therapist or work through your own journaling or reflection and realize your triggers, you get to have a little more influence for how you respond once you recognize that that's going to push you to the point of having anxiety or worries or fears.
Yeah, we kind of deal with that in my household, myself included. And I think one of the things that helps me is questioning every thought, because I find that I have a lot of irrational thoughts, right? Like everybody's something, or that's just terrible, or whatever else. So questioning those, like you see all this Star Wars stuff behind me. I'm doing those Jedi things all the time and thinking about every thought. Well, with two great questions pop in, but we do have to wrap up for today. I apologize to those questions, but they're both about leadership. So our next webinar is about how leaders have to be in this space and what they can do to cultivate that culture. So please join us next time, but they're really highlighting again that perhaps people don't feel comfortable with their leadership on supporting their mental health or wanting to raise these as issues. So we apologize for missing those, but thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll continue this 3-part series. Next time is Leaders Lead. This webinar is available afterward. We'll email it out. It'll be on our website, and we look forward to seeing you all next month.